All right, good morning. We're going to continue our series, Overcome the Wilderness, as we go through this process here. Let's open the word of prayer today. Heavenly Father, God, I thank you so much, Lord, for being in the midst of all things. God, that you are a God above all. And in the midst of different seasons and stories of our lives, God, there you are. Your word is so powerful. Moved mountains, you've made walls crumble. God, so today we ask that that same power, that same force would be instilled inside of us to be conquerors of this world, to fulfill our destiny, to receive the promise and not worry about doing it on our own strength, but you, God. Move within us, God. Use my words today. Let them be yours, God. We become a force to change this world. In your name I pray. Amen. As we look at our scripture today, our story has progressed here. We've come out of Egypt. We've gone through the wilderness. Here we are. They've experienced manna, which we looked at last week was God's provision. And so during this time of God's provision, it wasn't that they rejected the bread, that they began to reject God. They had missed out on God's presence right in front of them because they were so focused on one side of one aspect, that are we fulfilled or are we hungry? And they missed out on the fact that God was saying, here's just my blessing. I'm right in front of you. I'm doing miraculous things for you, and you missed it. We missed out. And so today we're going to draw back just a little bit. We're going to look at the story of the 12 spies, right? And when you look at that, over this 40 years in the wilderness, the children of Israel have begun to adopt this as home, all right? Now this is like anything. If you've gone on vacation, you're like, I can live here forever on day 2. But by the end of the week, you're like, I can't wait to get home. Right? You get to that point. And so we run out. If you've ever been to college and you've lived in a dorm and you're like, how could this ever be home? And then time you leave, you're like, this is my home. Like, this little room is my everything right now. This is my home. We adopt to that because that's the only way that you can get by is if you take that as your home. And so here they are in the wilderness, traveling around the mountain, making it home. They just adopted the mindset. And what we learn here is if we adopt that mindset, we'll never get out. We become rooted there. And God has challenged us, says, let's overcome this wilderness mindset. Let's get on beyond this that says, this is where we're going to be, just circling the mountain, and let's go receive the promise that I have for you. I have something so spectacular for you if you just allow it to happen. And in our world and our culture, we get so distracted by things all around us, the craziness of life, and he says, right in front of you is this very promise I have for you. And so we begin to see that in the 12 spies here, when they went to spy on Canaan, remember the song, 10 were bad and 2 were... All right, let's work on that again. 10 were bad and 2 were... All right, we're awake. Okay, let's get moving here, all right? So we have this here, right? So 12 men were sent out to spy on Canaan, 10 were bad and 2 were... Hey, all right, we're picking up. So we begin to see here that some saw that there were giants, big and tall, right? Some saw that these grape clusters would fall. And then in the midst of that, some saw that God was in it all. That God's presence was right there in all of it for them. And the story is early on here. Yeah, we're jumping back just a little bit here, but we begin to see as this was designed only to be a 2-week journey. The transition, the mindset from being slave-minded. They've been held captive for years in slavery. To get them from being slave-minded to promise-minded, to go receive the promise of God. This transitional period of the wilderness was only designed to be short-term. And then this is where we begin to see why it had developed to be so long. We see that it's documented in 2 areas, in Numbers and Deuteronomy. They contradict each other a little bit, so we're going to focus on what we have in similarities here. But we begin to see that as they go out, they decide they need to spy on the land of Canaan. Now, in Numbers it says that Moses sent them out. In Deuteronomy it says that they decided themselves they needed to go out and see the land. But either way, they go out and they check out the land. Now, as remember, the land was very good. It's flowing to milk and honey. It's been prophesied for generations that this is going to be the greatest thing you've ever experienced. The best thing they could ever have. Trees and streams all around. Grapes larger than they've ever experienced in Egypt. Now remember, in Egypt, they experienced bountiful feasts, meat all the time. So this is even bigger than what they've ever had in Egypt to what they're expecting. They go out. They saw that it was very, very, very good. But when they came back, 10 of them said, we can't do it. At that point, God said, I'm done with you. And he begins to build up a generation that will prepare themselves to go in. So we begin to see that this first problem here that we see in Numbers chapter 13 is the problem that we begin to fulfill our minds and our problem we're solving with logic rather than with faith. We substitute our faith with logic. Our world tells us to do this all the time, but let's look at this. In chapter 13, verses 1 to 2, it says, "The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Send men to spy out the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the people of Israel. For each tribe of their fathers you shall send a man, each one a chief among them." Then we skip down to verse 17 through 20. It says, "Moses sent them out to spy out the land of Canaan, and said to them, Go up to Negeb, and go up to the hill country, and see what the land is, whether the people who dwell in are strong or weak, whether they are few or many, and whether the land that they dwell in is good or bad, and whether the cities that they dwell in are camps or strongholds, and whether the land is rich or poor, and whether they are in trees or there's not. Be of good courage, and bring some of the fruit back of the land." Now that time was the season of the first ripe grapes. So as we look at this, let's look from the beginning. Let's start in verse 1 right there. What does it say? It says this, that I am giving you the land. Right? I am giving the land to the people. This is a very important truth that we begin to see right in the beginning of this chapter. I am giving them the land. It is theirs. Now as you read this, he didn't stutter. No presumptions. It says, I am giving them the land. Straightforward. This is it. How great is that? I'm giving you the land that I've promised for generations, that you've heard about. You've expected and it's coming. You've been excited about receiving this. That all things have been leading to this moment here. I brought you out of Egypt just for this moment. This is your time. But yet, no matter whose idea it was, they sent observers in. And so here's the thing that we begin to see. As they go in, they check out the land, to see what's there, to see what this promise is all about, to see what the expectation is, we see something change, a transitional moment in the story here. Because the promise has already been given. I've already given you the land, but what does Moses do? Moses begins to act like a fool here. He gives them a list of questions. Right? Remember those questions? It says, what is the land like? Are the people strong or weak? Are there few or many? Is it good or is it bad? What kind of towns are there? Are these unwalled or are they fortified? How is the soil? Are there trees in the land? What are the grapes like? These are all the questions that Moses sent them out to find. And here's the problem. What God has moved them through with faith, out of Egypt, into the wilderness, and upon giving them the promise, they were living with faith, trust in God. And Moses changed that by giving them these questions. And now became a problem of logic. Things that they could do and they could outthink. But let's go back to verse 1. What does it say? I'm giving you the land, right? I'm giving you the land. And so our simple logic and faith tells us it doesn't matter. What difference does it make? What kind of towns there are? What kind of difference does it make if the people are big or small? What the soil's like? Because God didn't give them an option. Right? He didn't say, I'm going to give you this one, or this one. He says, this is the promise. It's right in front of you. And Moses goes, well, what's it like? Is it going to be okay? Is it going to be all right for me? Is this going to fit my life? What if I don't like it? Man, logic's a killer. Because we think we got it all under control. Logic tells me that I can plan it out. You've all lived this at some point. We're all being honest. We've said, I've already made a plan for God and He didn't follow it. I had it all planned out. I mapped it out. It was clear for Him. It was easy for Him. Just follow the plan. Because what we did is we used logic. We pieced things together. We built the story up. And right in that moment, we thought we had it all together. That's what they did. The promise was right in front of them. It was right there waiting for them to receive it. And they went forward and they're like, well, am I going to like this? How is this going to deal with all that I have to going on in my life? Do I have time for this? I'm super busy. And what we begin to see is, as they acted the fool, they put questions in their mind that we could determine. They used their minds rather than faith. Remember, He brought them out with a purpose and a passion. This is what you were built for. We talked about this week when you were designed for your destiny to receive the promise. And as they got there, as they're on the doorstep to go receive, they send them out. And Moses says, usher them in, go, lead, go receive. And they get there. Then they realize, oh, look at all this that they have there. I don't know if I'm that strong. I don't know if I'm that faithful. I don't know if I deserve it. Our mind leads us to doubt and to worry and to fear. And they stood still. This was the very promise that they'd been destined to for generations and generations, and yet the very thing that it caused was not what it was intended. Well, God says, I've got promise for you. This blessing is right in front of you. The questions that Moses listed and that they sought to find answers gave them only one ultimate big question. And that question was, so does God really know what he's doing? They began to think, does God really know what he's doing? And we've all asked that question. God, what are you doing? Who sees this? Who's being rewarded from this? And we go into this problem here. Right? We go back. Because we're tempted to use our logic to determine our future. We say, well, why did he give me a brain then? He gave us a brain so we can hear his voice. Remember the trees in the garden with the tree of fellowship? We're designed to be and spend time with God. But we're so tempted by the tree of good and evil that we would go and desire to do our own things to determine our best interests, our best future. He didn't give us a brain to determine right and wrong, but he gave us a brain to hear his voice, to be faithful, to be his following. But yet we're so determined that we're going to figure out our own purpose, our own future. We fall into the same trap as a church. Who's going to lead this place? What are we going to do? Young or old? Are they nice? Are they introvert, extrovert? Am I going to improve? Am I going to like? Am I going to go? Oh, man. All these questions. When God says the promise is right before you. Are we faithful? Same things with our homes. Are we leading our homes, our families, our coworkers, all these people that we come in contact with? Are we willing to lead with purpose and passion? Are we going to allow logic to stop the advancement of the gospel? To worry, what am I going to look like? Or what's it going to sound like? Or can I even be used? Do I have purpose? Do I have meaning? Do I have value? All those things we begin to listen to the lie rather than trust. We see that if we trust God's promises, it's always victory in place. But if we want to hold on to our own decisions, our own ways, it gets really ugly. And what forms here is we get this big butt syndrome, right? Like it builds up and we go, oh, but, I would go, but, like I want to be part, but, like, that's we do this all the time. People, we're common. This is like, I love coming and God, but, I got stuff to do, like, I love to come, but, and we I'll pray for you. Good day. Pray for you. Gotcha, right? So what he says is we got to get over this. If this part of our mentality, this is the way that we make up, we get stuck in the wilderness because of this. We refuse to move forward. Verses 26 through 33, continuing in chapter 13, it says, and they came to Moses and Aaron, to all the congregation of the people of Israel, in the wilderness of Paran and Kadesh. They brought back the word for them. And to all the congregation, they showed them the fruit of the land. And they told them, we came to the land to which you sent us. It flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. However, the people who dwell in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. And besides, we saw that the descendants of Anak there, the Amalekites, and dwell in the land of Negeb, the Hittites and the Jebusites, and the Amorites dwell in the hill country, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea and along the Jordan. So that, however, in other translations, is your big but there. But this is where we're going. This is prosperous. It's fruitful. But, get in my own way here, right? But we begin to see Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and occupy it, for we are well able to overcome it. Then the men who have gone up with him said, we are not able to go up against the people, for that they are stronger than we are. That they brought to the people of Israel a bad report of the land that they had spied out, saying, the land through which you have gone to spy out is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people that saw it are in great height. And there we see Nephilim, the son of Anak, who came from Nephilim, who seemed to be who we seem to ourselves like grasshoppers, and we seem to them. We give this report to Moses. They go back and they testify and say, this is how awesome is this land? It's so great, it's so powerful. It flows with milk and honey, which it translates to abundance of enjoyment. Everything was bigger and stronger because it was more fruitful, it was more producing. They said, look at these grapes, but here comes the big but. But, the cities are fortified, there's walls, there's giants living there. It's not just one group that we're going to defeat. We're going to defeat multiple groups of people. All the ites live there. The Jebusites, the Canaanites, the Amorites, they all live there. We got to go overcome all of this. They're stronger than we are. They're bigger than we are. We obviously look like grasshoppers in their eyes. They heard the voice of God. And yet they decided that they could figure it out on their own. That problem that we first saw, that we thought we could handle it, got bigger and bigger and bigger. Bigger than what it really was. And the thing is, though, sometimes we just have to get out of his way. But when we hold on, that little decision changes our review of reality. God knew what he was trying to do way before that we even pretended to figure it out. He desires to do the impossible through his people. The impossible through his people to help build up his generation, to impact the world, to give them the promise that they're so destined to. That the problem is, as we look out to the world, it says that we look like grasshoppers in their giants' eyes. We automatically put ourselves in the back seat, take ourselves out of the game, saying that, well, obviously we're never going to be big enough. You don't even know how they view us. And yet we take ourselves out saying, well, obviously we must be too small to move forward. To defeat this mindset, to defeat the mindset of the wilderness that we've imagined as home, we have to go into it with trust. God has been speaking these wonderful promises, the growth and the revival that we begin to see in people's hearts as God continues to move through this place. His story is not over. And as a beginning, as a church, as a congregation, this is our 12 spy moment as we continue to set ourselves on course to receiving God's promise, to prepare ourselves through this transition, to survive the wilderness. God never abandoned them. God never left them in the promise. He continued to seek them forward. He is faithful to us, and he never changed his mind on them, and he hasn't changed his mind on us. Because they understood that we belong here. We are deserving of the promise of God. And it's our destiny that we will fulfill it. He hasn't changed his mind. He hasn't turned away. He hasn't looked back. Because he will keep his promise. And there are no buts about it. He is leading us forward. The problem is that we begin to see a sad ending here. You skip forward. God rejected those who rejected him. He said, only your children are going to the land. Only those who have been part of this, who believe, will go into the land, who will begin to experience this. And they go off and they're like, well, that's fine. He promised to us before, so we'll keep going. And what they realize is the promise has now changed because they rejected him. And they go and trying to do it on their own, they fall by the sword. They were defeated. They thought they could make logic work. That we can force our wrath, to force our will. It says we begin to lead to death. And when he challenges us, he says, just trust me. Can we trust God together here? We begin to see here the cry of faith in Numbers chapter 14, verse 5 through 9. Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before the assembly of the congregation of the people of Israel. And Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, who were among them, those who had spied out the land, tore their clothes and said to the congregation of the people of Israel, the land which we possess through to spy out is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord delights in us, he will bring it to us, to this land, and give it to us. A land that flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not fear the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their protection is removed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. Essentially, this is one of the greatest battle cries that we begin to experience. This is the fourth quarter. The game is on the line. They're going down there and says, we can do this. It is ours to possess right now. He says, have eyes of faith. Do you see it? Do we believe that God is still within us? If we believe that this is God's promise, and if we do, he will take care of us. They're going out, they're tearing their clothes, they're bowing down, pleading that this is our time. That this is the land that has been promised to us. No obstacles are too big for our God. And that word of the Lord is within us. Don't be afraid of what you can't see. Don't let logic convince you of a bad future. When God says, I've got nothing but good things for your life. He says, live by faith. Just like last week, the bread of life When we reject God's provision, we reject Him. He says, now's the time to go. We can't use logic to make transition work, but we must use faith and trust. The trust of God. So he challenged them and says, can we trust God together? Can we make it a point that together we believe that our God is greater? That our God is strong, and the very mountains that are there, He's the one that can move them. Those huge walls, He's the one that can make them fall. To bring giants to their knees, to overcome. That same power is possessed inside of us. To those who believe, those who trust God together, and don't settle that logic will be the determining factor of what God does in our world, that we don't have the story already written, but we'll be faithful followers and allow Him to play out a story that's so much greater than we could ever imagine or expect, that God's blessing would rain down because we allowed Him to just work. Think about the promise. Think about the victory that we're able to proclaim. The promise of the land of the milk and honey just flowing. Grapes, a house to dwell in. A place that we can stay and worship God day and night. A place that we get to build generations upon. But we have to learn to trust God together. This is our 12 spy moment. As God is revealing Himself to us, are we focused on logic? Or are we focused on faith? Because in every aspect, we're going to want to ask those questions to ourselves. How great is this going to be? How strong are they? Are we going to be able to overcome? Is this what is needed? When God says, I've already written you a promise. I'm just waiting to deliver. Will you just trust me? Will we trust God together?